Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to the first edition of my WrestleMania review series. I am Alex Catano, formerly known as the podcaster of Got the Nation Studios. For those of you who do not know what Got the Nation Studios is, it's a podcast where I interview different people in the community, my community of San Diego. I have been taking a little bit of a break from it, and I'll be coming back to that in March. And hopefully you guys get a idea of who I am, but I want to do something different this year. I want to try and talk about stuff that I care about, particularly wrestling. As you all know, I've been a massive wrestling fan. For those of you who do know me, I used to do these videos back in 2015 through 2022, I want to say, is when Roman held both belts at WrestleMania. I think that was the last time, if you guys remember, back in my Double X Prince era. But I think it will be time to try to give this another chance. So, without further ado, here is my review of the very first ever WrestleMania. And for the first WrestleMania, it was actually not a great show, but it was definitely a good show to kick off WrestleMania. They sold this show really good. They basically made it feel like the biggest wrestling event of all time. They had it at Madison Square Garden. If you guys didn't know, back in the day, Madison Square Garden was like the place to have a show at. And they had to sell it. And it wasn't necessarily that they wanted to make WrestleMania. I mean, no one predicted that WrestleMania was going to be as big as it is today, but the goal and the vision was there, like, oh, let's make this the biggest thing possible. um so what did they do? They basically just had fun, but at the same time managed to give you moments and things that people will talk about for a long time, particularly the main event, which was by far the most important thing. They needed something big to close out the night. So um, but before we get to the main event, we have to start all the way from the beginning when we had Tito Santana versus the Executioner. It was a very short match for the very first match of WrestleMania. It was a typical style, like, modern day lucha libre type of match. Both I mean, obviously everybody knows who Tito Santana is. Uh, the Executioner, Paul E. Pershman, I believe that was his name, Buddy Rose. He was okay. He did pretty solid in the match. Obviously, Tito Santana had the win. He was the more popular star. Um, and I know I mentioned that it was like a lucha libre style type of match, but I mean, Buddy Rose kind of had that aura to him. The Executioner, I should say, he kind of had that similar style, but it meshed well and it was okay for the first match. It was just more so people can get to see Tito Santana, a very popular star, win um, this show. Now, for years, I've always like saw the WrestleMania card, but I didn't really pay attention to it. I didn't like watch the show. Like, I think I've seen maybe the main event and maybe I've seen like a couple matches, like skimmed through them. The first time I ever watched WrestleMania, the first one. So when I watched King Kong Bundy versus Special Delivery Jones, I didn't realize that was Odyssey Jones. For those of you who are massive wrestling fans nowadays, know that Odyssey Jones just got inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2024, so that's pretty cool to see a full circle of that. But King Kong Bundy squashes him in 9 seconds. In real life, it was like a lot longer, but they want to tell you it's 9 seconds. So it was a good job that they try to make King Kong Bundy a star. Because I think King Kong Bundy was still new. He was still not the mega star, especially when you had other people like Big John Studd and Andre the Giant, who we'll get to later on. But it was nice to see that they were at the time pushing stars with different looks and styles. Um, Next up, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. We was in um, who fought Matt Bourne. For those of you who do not know, Matt Bourne is Doink the Clown, the original Doink the Clown. It was a nice match. Like I said, it was just, again, just a way to get people in the card. Back in the day, people used to just be on the card and then they would do the best they can. And something that I actually kind of miss in wrestling today, short matches. Short matches that just get the crowd pumped. And something that I also miss in wrestling is, you know, the wrestlers actually making up the time. They don't be like, oh, I only got 6 minutes. You make the most with 6 minutes. These guys got four and they did the best. So they did a good job of making Matt Bourne and Ricky Steamboat look great. Obviously, Matt Bourne eventually became Doink the Clown. Ricky became the Dragon. So I can't really fault them. So it was just kind of a nice way to see these legends that we know today. Brutus the Barber Beefcake versus David San Martino, Bruno San Martino's son. This was the first actual bad match. It was very clear that they were trying to push David San Martino to be the top guy because his father, Bruno San Martino, was literally the greatest WWF champion at the time. And they clearly wanted to make the most out of that. It was fine um, that they had Brutus Beefcake in there, but man, this was just bad. If anything, what I would have done with David Sammartino, tell me if this is horrible, but I would have had David Sammartino get squashed by King Kong Bundy. And the reason why I would do that is like, okay, we have the very first WrestleMania. He's debuting against a giant. I'm like, is he gonna have that legacy that his dad did? And they're like, nope. King Kong Bundy squashes him. So now it makes King Kong Bundy even bigger because he beat um the son of Bruno Sammartino. Um, and then I don't know where Bruno goes from there. Then again, Odyssey Jones, he did invent the promo. He was the reason why people got into making promos. So, I mean, I in a way maybe I think some of these wrestlers could have been moved around, to be honest. But like I said, this is the first bad match, and it's kind of sucks because Brutus the Beefcake actually is a good wrestler. David San Martino, I'm sorry, dude, you're not Bruno San Martino, and not to discredit him. You know, I will never know what it's like to be in the ring, but based on entertainment, like, it didn't do so good. So, yeah, this is the first dud of a match, I would say. Greg the Hammer Valentine versus Junkyard Dog. This was another match that I could have enjoyed because I am a fan of Junkyard Dog. He was very entertaining watching his 80s stuff. Greg the Hammer Valentine, even though he has some questionable ideas. If you guys remember back in 2015, Greg Valentine had said some very awful things about women's wrestling, and yeah, let's not go there. But this was a solid match for what it was. Now, Junkyard Dog was never a great wrestler, if I'm being honest. But he knew how to get a crowd pump. He knew how to get the crowd going, and that's exactly what he did in this match. My biggest problem with this match is that Junkyard Dog won by countout, which means he never won the Intercontinental Championship. Even if he had won it and then lost it like a week or a month later, I would have been okay with that because Junkyard Dog knew how to get people, or he knew how to get the crowd going. Like the fact that Greg Valentine walked out as champion and then the Junkyard Dog was still standing there tall, it would have been more impactful if he had won the Intercontinental Championship. And this would have made him the first ever African American Intercontinental Champion. I think everybody would have been happy with that. I believe the first ever African American Intercontinental Champion was Ahmed Johnson. I could be wrong on that, but like I said, it could have been cool to have Junkyard Dog have his moment at the Showcase of the Immortals, the very first WrestleMania. They kind of dropped the ball there, and uh, when we get to later WrestleManias, I know they're gonna drop the ball because there is a lot of matches back in the day that ended in DQ and count out. That's the one thing I hate about old school wrestling, when they didn't want to lose people to give people a belt, they would win, but by count out or DQ. I wasn't a big fan of that, and I still to this day I'm not a fan of it. The match that I am a fan of, and is surprisingly only 6 minutes, Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov versus the UX Express, Barry Windham and Mike Rotunda, father and uncle of Bray Wyatt, Bo Dallas. So this was an amazing match for only 6 minutes. Possibly one of the better 6 minute matches. I remember being heavily entertained with this one. And I was just like, oh man, I think the only disappointing thing is that it wasn't long enough. Like, if anything deserved a lot longer time was this one. But they did the best that they did with only 6 minutes, almost 7 minutes, I could say. And Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov won. I think that's reasonable considering that at the time Iron Sheik was the last WWF, or I think it was WWF now. Um, that he was the last champion of the company. So it's very fitting that Iron Sheik would get a WrestleMania moment and the first WrestleMania of all time. And Nikolai Volkov, who I wasn't high on, Iron Sheik was always the more entertaining one. Even now, rest in peace to the man. He was very entertaining, and I'm glad that they won the tag team championships. I think they deserved it, and I think they did the best they did with 7 minutes. Like I said, I was heavily entertained. Andre the Giant versus Big John Studd, and it's actually kind of weird watching Bobby the Brain Heenan on the side of Big John Studd and not Andre the Giant, considering that my knowledge of uh Bobby the Brain Heenan was with him and Andre back then. That's how I grew up watching both men them together. I mean, WrestleMania 3 by itself, but anyways, this was not necessarily a good match. It wasn't supposed to, because you literally have two giants. One of them's got a body slam the other, and if Andre wins, he also gets $15,000, and if he loses, his career is over. So there was a lot of stakes in this. So the fact that it was like, can Big John Studd get picked up and body slammed by Andre the Giant? And that's what people were hyped about. If anything, this was the very first WrestleMania moment ever. So Andre the Giant body slamming Big John Studd, it was a massive deal, and I was like, "Ooh, this is cool." And it showed me very good, like, how well they knew how to write Andre the Giant. Like, this was like, no Giant has ever been replicated like this. They tried with Big Show, they tried with Braun Strowman, they even are trying with Bronson Reed right now. I mean, this is like the OG Giant. Like, you will never top one like Andre the Giant. So him winning that moment, him throwing the money to the crowd, and then Bobby the Brain Heenan stealing it back, it was just brilliant, and I loved it. So, like I said, the match wasn't what was important. It was the moment, and it was enjoyable. That's what I miss about this. And on to possibly not a good match, but again, a great moment. Wendy Richter beating Leilani Kai for the women's championship. Seeing the fabulous Moolah on this is very awkward, to be honest. I mean, she's just a horrible human being, but let's not talk about that. Wendy Richter winning the championship and having Cyndi Lauper on the corner. That's honestly the biggest selling point of this entire match, was Cyndi Lauper, a non-wrestler. But at the time, Girls Just Want to Have Fun was very popular. And as you all know, I forgot the name of the wrestler, but he was in the music video. So the fact that Cyndi Lauper hasn't even been in the Celebrity Wing Hall of Fame is kind of sad. But I did enjoy the moment of Wendy Richter winning the WWF Championship. Actually, when I started watching wrestling was the same time that Wendy Richter got inducted into the Hall of Fame. So that was actually kind of a nice touch to witness that. Like when I started watching wrestling, I saw that Wendy Richter got into the Hall of Fame. I got to learn more about her in that Hall of Fame speech, and then I watched this match, and it was, I mean, like I said, not a great match, but a great moment. So, and then one thing I will say about Peacock, I understand why they did this, but like it is kind of sad that we didn't get to hear girls just want to have fun on the WrestleMania replay. Like I believe back then, like in the actual WrestleMania, like Wendy Richter did come out to girls just want to have fun. I do believe that is what happened, but then they gave her a generic song. But it makes sense because it's a very popular song. You don't want to get copyright, especially nowadays. So it's very fitting that that's what they did. And, it would have cost a fortune to use that song over and over. So I respect them for that side. I'll say that. But then we move on to the main event. Hulk Hogan and Mr. T versus Roddy Piper and Paul Orndorff. Now, the real story was Roddy Piper and Mr. T, but you can't really sell it with just those two. I mean, Mr. T was the top celebrity back in 84, 85. So it's very fitting that they would have him involved here, like the biggest celebrity they got, which is kind of what they did with Bad Bunny when he came to WWE. But Mr. T and Roddy Piper, it had all the potential of being super entertaining, but it was no way gonna be the. I mean, it was the top selling thing, but there's no way that they were gonna close with that. So why not bring Hulk Hogan, the face of WWF, um, and then he teams up with Mr. T. Roddy Piper finds another guy, Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff, who I believe was unbeatable at this point, either undefeated or he just had a good streak of wins and stuff. So it was very fitting that they would do this, and it was very good and it was very entertaining. Obviously, the longest match of the entire card, which was very fitting because the most important thing was this match. This match sold WrestleMania, and that was the most important part. The hot tag with Mr. T, like finally getting the rings, like oh shoot, what is Mr. T gonna do? And he put into his, he basically, you gotta give him his flowers for the time being. Like without Mr. T, this show would have bombed. Without Hulk Hogan on the top of the main event, this show would have bombed. And without Roddy Piper's heelish tactics, those three were like the big main selling point. Mr. Wonderful, Paul Orndorff, again, give him his flowers. But it was very clear that they just needed a strong man to be there for Paul Orndorff. One thing I almost forgot to mention, Muhammad Ali was the referee for this main event, and that basically showed you how important this first ever WrestleMania was. They managed to get Muhammad Ali as a special guest referee. Pat Patterson was also there, but the fact that they got Muhammad Ali, it just shows the effort that they were going to put into this show. Um, and Muhammad Ali plays a big part of Madison Square Garden, so that itself was pretty cool. They had a lot of celebrities on this show, but I think the one that's not Mr. T that did stick out was Muhammad Ali. Wendy Richter was another one, but it was very awesome to know that they were able to get celebrities involved and making it feel as special as it did. It's kind of like what the early stages of SNL did. They got a massive celebrity for SNL, such as Andy Kaufman, one of the greatest comedians of all time, who also was involved in wrestling at some point in his life. So, yeah, thumbs up on that. I heard that the original plan was supposed to be Hulk Hogan and Mr. T and Jimmy Snuka versus Paul Orndorff, Roddy Piper, and Bob Orton. Thank God they did not do that. That just would have been overkill. So thankfully they didn't go that route. They just stuck with 2 and 2. And I thought they did a fantastic job. A lot of people are mad that in the first WrestleMania the WWF Championship was not defended, but I felt like it didn't need to. They just needed a strong main event that's gonna helped them carry and sell WrestleMania. I mean, the fact that this show was one of the highest watched wrestling programs at the time. It was 19. I'm just looking at it based on Wikipedia, but it was 19,121 in attendance, and it was just it was pretty good, and I can't fault it for that. Now, as an overall show, I thought it did pretty good. Um, I thought it was entertaining for the first one, not the best thing. I would say I would give this show a B, and I think it didn't need to go higher than a B. It did its job. So, yeah, fantastic first WrestleMania for what it was. Again, it wasn't selling matches like it does nowadays. It was selling moments. That's where it led to WrestleMania 2 and so on and so forth. So for the first one, it did its job. So I'll just stick it and give it a B. Again, the biggest problems that the DQ finishes, the count of finishes, like I wasn't high on those. But everything else, pretty good. Um, anyways, that's the first one. First ever review of the first WrestleMania. Very entertaining show. We'll see you at WrestleMania 2. And take care, everybody.